Hey everyone, it's Stephanie and Lucy. She's being a little dramatic today. So today I'm here to talk about my February wrap-up. February was actually a fantastic reading month for me, so let's just jump right in. So the first thing I finished was Barchester Towers by Anthony Trollope. This is book 2 in his Barchester series, and I ended up enjoying this. The first part I really enjoyed, and then it sagged because it had a lot of church politics, which I understand what he was trying to do, but it was a hair boring, which feels like blasphemy to say about a Trollope novel, but it was a little boring. But yeah, it picked up again. There was some great gossip, there was some great drama with some characters, and it was a really good time. So I finished this so that I could read Dr. Thorne with Penny and Tiffany. I'm excited to get to that one. Next I read The Deep Sky by Yume Kidasai. I'm so sorry, I mispronounced that. So this is a sci-fi book. I think it came out 2023. I don't remember when last year. I read this toward, I think, middle February, and it's currently almost the middle of March, and I really don't remember that much of it. It did not have that much staying power. I do remember the basic premise is like a murder mystery set in space, which was really interesting, and it did have some good stuff in it. I enjoyed some of the topics and themes that it explored, but I felt like it was a little too long. I was feeling really fatigued by the end, and I was ready to be done with it. I did enjoy the writing style, and I definitely would read more by this author. I think she's got a book coming out this year that also looks really cool, so I'm definitely interested in checking that out. Next I read a short story before I actually got the physical copy. So it was An Unprotected Female at the Pyramids by Anthony Trollope. Really enjoyed it. It was fun. But basically, there's a group on Instagram that I'm reading this with, and we're reading one short story a week. So it'll cover his early short stories, the later short stories, and then I think there are 2 that aren't in either book. So I read this throughout the month. I do think I prefer his novels, but there have been some hits in here that I have enjoyed. So this is gonna pop up pretty much for a good chunk of the year, but I'm really enjoying it so far. Next, I reread Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. I finished The Realm of the Elderlings last year, and I immediately wanted to start this over. And I had to give myself a break. You can only handle so much emotional damage in so many books in a row. But I absolutely adored this reread, and I definitely appreciated this one a lot more because when I first started the series, this was one of my least favorites. I just think so many of the later books just really build on this that it suffered in comparison. But I do think it's a really good start to the series, and I really appreciated Fitz a lot more knowing what I know now, and I really appreciated all the threads that she starts to weave in this book that relate to later books, which just makes me just really appreciate her even more. She is such a master writer. Yes, the series has flaws. Yes, some of the books are probably longer than they should be, but I just really love her writing and her character work and her world, and I just fell in love with the story all over again. So I've been eagerly waiting to when I have enough free time to get to Royal Assassin, because that one was one of my absolute favorites when I read it the first time. So this was a 4-star when I first read it. I think it was 3 years ago, because I took a hair of a break and then got back into it. And this time I would definitely give it 5 stars. Just the amount of just weaving of all these threads and the beginning of all these threads and the magic and the world building is just fantastic. Lucy's supervising.
Yeah, you're just so cute.
yeah. Next, I read Dombey and Son by Charles Dickens. This is part of my Dickens project, but I also read it with a group of lovely people, and I decided to break my own rules and skip Barnaby Rudge and Martin Chuzzlewit so that I could read this one, because Dickens is fun being read with a group, and this one was super chunky, 800 pages, but it's got the illustrations in it. We follow Dombey, his son, and his daughter, as well as a smattering of other characters, just like is typical for Charles Dickens. I don't want to spoil anything. But basically, the characters we follow in this, I was not anticipating some of them being such a focus as when we first started, but I just really, really enjoyed this. I did feel a little like beleaguered at times, especially like starting out. It just felt kind of like a denser Dickens, but once I really like got in the rhythm and was like steadily reading it, not reading 3 chapters and taking a break for a week, because I started this in November of 2023 and finished it in February, and I finished the majority of it in February. So once I like steadily read a little bit every day or every other day and kept up that momentum, it really gave me time to get connected with the characters and the story. And I just ended up really enjoying it. It's definitely a favorite Dickens. And some of the storylines in here are so beautiful. There's, of course, some villains in here that are absolutely despicable. There's one in here, and they always reference his incredibly white teeth. And they talk about teeth so much. It's very odd. Very odd. This was a surprising favorite. Not that I was expecting to hate it, but I just went in knowing people just absolutely adore this book. But I ended up really, really loving it. The next 2 books I read with my friend Tiffany from Beautiful Minutia, and that is What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher and The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe. This is for the We Love Jenny readathon in honor of Jennifer Brooks, who unfortunately passed away earlier this year. This was my first T. Kingfisher. I absolutely loved it. Like, loved it. And we both said while we were reading it, like, it's so hard to like not blow through this, because I think it was only 150-ish pages, but I just wanted to stay in the world, and I loved her writing, and I loved the exploration of pronouns and in relation to like soldiers in the military. Like, looking back after having reread The Fall of the House of Usher, I really appreciated how much the original inspired her story, but then she kind of turned it and made it into her own while still being respectful of the original story. And I like it more than the Edgar Allan Poe story. But I'm also not the biggest fan of early American literature, with a few exceptions like Moby Dick. Yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. And The Fall of the House of Usher, I enjoyed it too. I didn't remember how short it was, because it's probably been, oh my gosh, 15, 20 years since I read it, which I sound old now. I'm only 34. It was really, really good, and I immediately put What Feasts at Night on hold, which is the sequel to this. And of course, the wait is like several months at every single one of the libraries that I have cards with. But it was really, really good, and her horror and descriptions were fantastic. She talks about fungi, mushrooms, and early in my Voxer chat with Tiffany, I said, this is really reminding me of Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia, because there's mushrooms in that too. Not that they were the same, but I was just getting that, like, they both have that creepy, like, oh my gosh, the mushrooms I think have something to do with this vibe. And when I got to the acknowledgements and author notes section, it turns out she was inspired by Mexican Gothic, and I never pick up on stuff like that, so I was so proud of myself. Then I read The Vicar of Wakefield by Oliver Goldsmith. This was another buddy read with Tiffany, and also with Dia from Novel Idea. And this book was so incredibly wonderful. All I knew about it was that Christy from Christy Lewis Dostoevsky in Space absolutely loved it. I think she read it last year, the year before, for Feb Regency. And we decided we were only going to read 3 chapters a day. And it was so hard to stop at 3 chapters a day. And we follow Dr. Primrose, and he's a vicar, and falls on hard times. And we follow his family's adventures through those harder times. And it was comical at times. It was touching at times. There were so many lovely quotes and writing throughout the book. The ending was a little too convenient, or like one thing didn't really mesh with the rest of the story, but I still absolutely loved it. And all 3 of us just kept gushing over it. And I really liked that. I think what I appreciated about it too was that I'm not a religious person, but the vicar, he's very religious. He is a vicar, but he really strived to practice what he preached, and genuinely wanted to be a good person and genuinely wanted to help people out. There's something in the novel, and I don't want to spoil it, but something happens. And if he had gone by like the conventions of the time, it would have been perfectly socially acceptable for him to just shun that person and like, no, you did this horrible sin. I'm never talking to you again. Like, go away. And he was like, no, we're supposed to love each other, and just took them in no matter what they did in the past and let them start over. And it was so touching. Everybody needs a Dr. Primrose in their life. It was so beautiful. And it's just one of those where I'll randomly think about it and it just makes me smile because it was such a lovely book. So highly recommend that. Even with the it almost was a perfect book. The ending just marred it a little bit, but despite that, I would absolutely read it again. And it was just such a lovely experience, and I'm just so happy we all loved it, and we're just gushing about it and randomly message each other about it because it's just one of those that's just gonna stick with you. So highly recommend. Next was the Feb Regency group read, and that was Belinda by Mariah Edgeworth. I'm so sad I missed the discussion for this. I was a co-host for Feb Regency, and I got my times completely mixed up, and I thought it started an hour later than it did. And by the time I realized, there was probably 10 minutes left in the discussion, and it was like, I missed it. So I'm really sad I didn't get to discuss it with people because I loved this so much. So we follow Belinda. We're just following her life, and she goes and she stays with the socialite, Lady Delacour, and just the shenanigans ensue. I was not expecting this to be this funny and witty. And really, this really probably should have been called Lady Delacour because she was the star of the show. And I absolutely loved it. It had great social commentary, great commentary on, society at the time. And there was actually, I believe, an interracial marriage in this, which was interesting. It talks about slavery, obsession, illness was a big one as well. And it just touched on so many different topics in such an interesting way. And I absolutely, like Christy said, she already started a reread of it, and it was so tempting to do that because it was so great. And the humor in this is fantastic. And honestly, this was a ride from beginning to end. I don't remember a point in this novel feeling like, when is this chapter going to be over, or how much do I have left of this book, because it was such a good time. So I definitely would like to read more of Mariah Edgeworth because this was just fabulous. And I just love this cover. It's so great. So I do recommend this one as well. Next I read Dragon's Promise by Elizabeth Lim, and this is the sequel to Six Crimson Cranes, and I adored Six Crimson Cranes. I thought it was really good. I think I would have been happier with Six Crimson Cranes as a standalone. I just wasn't really engaged with the sequel, and it just didn't hit the same way, and I just didn't really enjoy it as much. So it was kind of a miss for me, but I do still like her writing, so I do want to pick up. There's a prequel book, Her Radiant Curse, so I would like to pick that up. And I did enjoy the Spin the Dawn duology by Elizabeth Lim as well. So this particular book was just a miss for me. Then I read The Two Towers by Tolkien, second book in Lord of the Rings, and this was a reread for me, and it was so incredibly lovely. We're doing a read along on Tiffany's Patreon of the entire trilogy, and then we're discussing it at the end of the month. So it's just so lovely reading this and then discussing it with people who also just really love it and have a lot of nostalgia for it. And it's just been a really wonderful experience. I definitely forgot some things, like if you've seen the movies, like potatoes is in this, which I totally forgot about, and it made my day. And the other thing that's in here, which is not quite the exact same in the movie, but there's a scene where Sam is talking to Frodo after Faramir takes them captive, and he's saying, you know, there's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo. It's like those stories that they tell us, and it's worth fighting for, and blah blah blah. Like, you know the speech if you've seen it, and it's in here as well. Not quite the same, but it's talking about how they landed in this tale, and tales don't always turn out the way that you want them to. But it says, but aren't those always the best tales to hear? Though they may be the best tales to get landed in, I wonder what sort of tale we've fallen into. I just love it so much. And there was another quote, hope is not victory, that I really enjoyed. So honestly, I could gush about that book all day, but it's just one I appreciate. Every time I reread it, it's always a 5-star. And I am eagerly anticipating Return of the King, but I'm also sad because that means it'll be over. Finally, I read a children's book because I saw the author on, I don't remember what late night show. I will try to link it. I'm just drawing a complete blank. There was a Party for Langston Hughes by Jason Reynolds with illustrations by Jerome and Jarrett Pumphrey. And it was basically celebrating Langston Hughes and like a party, and the illustrations were fabulous. I thought it was really clever how they incorporated the words and part of the text of the story into the artwork. And it was basically just a celebration of Black poetry, Black music, Black icons, Black authors. It was only 56 pages, but I really enjoyed it. So highly recommend that one. It was really good, and I just really appreciate Jason Reynolds as a person, and I always love seeing him interviewed. He's just so incredibly just intelligent and really gets me to think about things from different perspectives. But February was a great reading month. Lots of really good 5-star reads if I was still reading books, and some great rereads. So I could not ask for anything more. So what did you read in February? If you'd like to leave an emoji, let's leave a tree emoji for our beloved Treebeard, the Ent that we met in the Two Towers. And if you like this video, make sure to click the thumbs up, subscribe if you want to, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.